Welcome back. Tonight, we drift through the sleepy streets of Paris. So wherever you are, however your day has been, you have nothing to do now but rest. There are no twists tonight, nothing to follow, nothing you need to remember in the morning. A city of honeyed stone and grey roofs, settling into quiet beneath the evening lamplight. We'll drift slowly, in no hurry to be anywhere at all. If these journeys help you rest, you're welcome to follow along, but only if you'd like to. And if you're listening now, leave the name of your city and the time where you are. Wherever you're listening from, you're in good company tonight. So let yourself settle. Let your shoulders soften. And let your eyes close whenever they're ready. Breathe in slowly. And let it go. There's no need to stay awake for any of this. Just let the streets of Paris come to you. Before there was a city of light, there was just an island in a river. The story of Paris begins here, on the Île de la Cité. A tribe called the Parisian chose this spot, not for its beauty, but for its safety. The island was a natural fortress, easy to defend. It was also a perfect crossing point on the busy Seine. Trade routes moved up and down the river, carrying goods and people. By settling here, the tribe anchored their future to the water. They created a vital link in a chain of commerce and travel. This single, practical decision determined the city's heart. It ensured that Paris would always be a city of the river, its origins forever tied to the currents that flow through its center. The island was a strategic choice that shaped a destiny. The wide, elegant boulevards of Paris feel like they were made for strolling. They let in light and air, giving the city its grand, open feeling. But their design had a second, more severe purpose. When Baron Haussmann carved these avenues through the old city, he wasn't just thinking of beauty. He was thinking of control. The narrow, winding streets of medieval Paris were easy to barricade during uprisings. Haussmann's new boulevards were wide and straight. They were designed to stop citizens from blocking the streets. They also allowed soldiers to move quickly across the city, to control any unrest. So as you walk down these grand roads, you are walking through a dual legacy. They are monuments to both civic pride and state power, a beautiful solution to a problem of rebellion. There is a part of Paris that has felt like the mind of the city for centuries. We call it the Latin Quarter. The name itself tells a story of how this identity was formed. In the 12th century, the University of Paris was founded on the left bank. Scholars, teachers and students from all over Europe gathered here. They came from different countries and spoke different languages. But they all shared one common tongue for their studies: Latin. The sound of Latin filled the lecture halls, and spilled out into the narrow streets. It became the sound of the neighborhood. This is why the area became known as the Latin Quarter. It wasn't just a location, but a community defined by a shared language of ideas. That intellectual spirit has never really left these streets. The Eiffel Tower was never meant to last. It was built as a grand temporary entrance for the 1889 World's Fair. The plan was always to tear it down after 20 years. By 1909 its time was up. The tower was seen by many as a useless, iron eyesore. It was scheduled for demolition, destined to become a footnote in the city's history. But a new technology saved it. The invention of the radio telegraph required tall antennas. The tower's great height made it the perfect structure for a transmitter. Suddenly, the monument was not just ornamental, it was essential. It became a vital communications hub for the entire country. This new purpose saved it from being dismantled. The icon of Paris was rescued from oblivion not by art, but by science, its silhouette secured by invisible waves in the air. The pale, luminous stone of Paris gives the city its signature glow. For centuries, that limestone was taken from the ground directly beneath the growing city. An immense network of quarries was dug out, creating a hollow foundation. Paris was, quite literally, built on its own absence. For a long time, this was forgotten. Then, in the 18th century, the ground began to give way. Tunnels collapsed, swallowing streets and buildings. A sense of dread spread through the city. This crisis forced a massive engineering project. Workers had to go down into the darkness to map the forgotten tunnels. They had to reinforce the ground beneath the streets to keep the city from falling in on itself. It was a reckoning with the city's own foundations, a reminder of the vast, empty spaces that lie just beneath the familiar pavement. The périphérique is a constant presence in modern Paris. It's a ring of rushing traffic that defines the city's edge. This concrete river wasn't carved into a random path. It was built directly on the footprint of an old wall. The Thiers Wall was a 19th century fortification, a line of defense that circled the capital. When the wall was torn down in the 20th century, the space it left behind was used for the new ring road. This decision had a lasting effect. The old military boundary became a new, modern one. The highway created a hard border between the central city and the suburbs beyond. It shaped how people moved and where they lived. It turned a historical line of defense into a very real social and geographical divide that you can still feel today. The Louvre is now the world's most famous public museum. But it only became a home for art because it was first abandoned as a home for kings. For centuries, the Louvre was a royal palace, the center of power in France. Then, King Louis XIV decided to move his court. He built a new, grander palace at Versailles, outside the city. The royal court left the Louvre behind. The vast, magnificent building fell into a state of neglect. It sat mostly empty, its grand halls gathering dust. This act of abandonment created an opportunity. When the French Revolution came, the empty palace was the perfect place to create a new kind of institution. The revolutionaries reclaimed it for the people. They decided it would house the nation's art, turning a symbol of royal power into a temple of public culture. The Paris we know today was born in a single moment. In 1860, the city did not just grow, it suddenly doubled in size. This happened through a single government decree. The city officially annexed all the surrounding villages. Places like Montmartre, with its windmills and vineyards, were independent towns. Belleville and Vaugirard had their own communities and identities. Overnight, they were absorbed into the capital. Their independence vanished, and they became the outer arrondissements of a new, much larger Paris. This wasn't a slow, organic expansion. It was a sudden administrative act that completely redrew the map. It transformed the city's character and scale in an instant. The quiet villages on the edge of Paris woke up one morning to find they were now part of the center of a bustling modern metropolis. The Seine is the soul of Paris, but it has not always been a gentle one. In 1910, the river rose to historic levels. It flooded the city with a quiet, relentless force. Water filled the new metro tunnels, turning them into underground canals. Streets became rivers, and Parisians had to use boats to get around. Grand boulevards reflected in the murky floodwaters. This great flood was a pivotal disaster. It showed the city just how vulnerable it was to the river that had created it. The event forced a complete rethinking of Paris's relationship with the Seine. In the following decades, a massive project began. A series of large dams and reservoirs were built upstream. These works were designed to control the river's flow and prevent another catastrophe. The flood of 1910 was the moment Paris decided it had to tame the river for good. For centuries, the very center of Paris was a place of food and chaos. The Great Market of Les Halles was known as the belly of Paris. It was a sprawling, bustling hub of commerce that fed the entire city. But by the 1960s, it was choking the capital. The endless stream of trucks created constant traffic jams. The market had become too big for its historic home. In 1969, a drastic decision was made. The entire market was moved overnight to the suburb of Rungis. This single massive logistical shift was a profound change. It erased the city's historic heart. The iconic cast-iron pavilions were torn down, leaving a giant void. This created a cultural and architectural hole in the center of Paris. It would take decades of debate and construction to decide how to fill it. Not all of Paris's rivers are visible. The Bièvre once flowed openly through the left bank. It was a small, meandering river that shaped the landscape. But as the city grew, industries gathered on its banks. Tanneries, dyeworks and laundries poured their waste into the water. The river became incredibly polluted. It was an open sewer, a source of disease and foul smells. The city's solution was not to clean the river, but to hide it. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Bièvre was vaulted over. It was encased in stone and turned into part of the sewer system. The river disappeared from sight, buried beneath new streets and buildings. But it never went away. It still flows silently beneath the 5th and 13th arrondissements, a lost river that continues its journey through the city in darkness. If you travel by train in Paris, you might notice something strange. The city has no single central station. This is a direct result of how the railways were built in the 19th century. The great train stations like Gare du Nord and Gare de Lyon were constructed by competing private companies. Each company built its own grand terminus at the edge of the city center. These stations were designed as endpoints for lines radiating out into the country. They were never connected to each other. This decision shaped how Paris moves to this day. To get from one side of France to the other, you often have to cross the city. You arrive at one station, then travel through Paris to catch your next train at another. The city's map of transit was defined by this early, disconnected vision. The Marais is one of Paris's most beautiful and historic districts. Its narrow streets and grand old mansions feel like they have been there forever. But this entire neighborhood was almost lost. By the mid-20th century, the Marais was a dilapidated, overcrowded slum. Modernization plans called for wide new roads and new buildings. Most of the historic architecture was slated for demolition. The neighborhood was saved by a single piece of legislation. In 1962, the Minister of Culture, André Malraux, passed a law to protect historic districts. This law halted the bulldozers. It spurred a new movement of careful restoration. Dilapidated mansions were painstakingly repaired. The area was slowly transformed from a place of decay into the preserved, fashionable neighborhood we see today. It was a turning point that chose preservation over progress, saving the past for the future. Paris has a famously protected skyline. Unlike many world capitals, its historic center is free of towering skyscrapers. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate choice made in the second half of the 20th century. As the city needed more modern office space, a decision was made to concentrate it in one area. The site chosen was La Défense, to the west of the city. This act of zoning created a dedicated business district on the horizon. It allowed for the construction of skyscrapers without disrupting the classic view of central Paris. This decision preserved the visual harmony of the city's historic core. It kept the forest of high-rises from sprouting among the old monuments. It created the distinct contrast we see today: the low, historic city, and the cluster of modern towers in the distance. The white dome of the Sacré-Cœur Basilica seems to float above the city. It sits on the highest point in Paris, the hill of Montmartre. But this hill is not as solid as it looks. It is largely made of gypsum, the soft mineral used to make plaster of Paris. For centuries, the hill was mined extensively for this valuable material. This left the ground riddled with tunnels and dangerously unstable. When it came time to build the massive basilica, the architects faced a huge challenge. The ground could not support the weight of the church. To solve this, they had to dig incredibly deep foundations. The supports for the Sacré-Cœur go down 33 meters, over 100 feet. They are like long roots that anchor the building to solid earth, bypassing the fragile, hollowed-out ground of the hill. When the French Revolution swept through Paris, it sought to remake the world. This included the city itself. The revolutionaries conducted a symbolic cleansing of the streets. They systematically renamed places that honored the old regime of royalty and religion. It was an attempt to erase the past from the map. The Place Louis XV, a grand royal square, was renamed the Place de la Révolution. This is where the guillotine was set up, turning a place of royal celebration into one of revolutionary justice. After the Reign of Terror ended, the name was changed again. It became the Place de la Concorde, a name expressing a hope for peace and reconciliation. The changing names of this single square tell a story of the city's most violent and transformative era. The names on the walls reflected the ideas on the streets. There is a wild green ribbon that encircles Paris. It is a quiet, overgrown path called the Petite Ceinture, or Little Belt. This railway line was not designed as a park. It was built in the 19th century to connect the city's main train stations. For decades it was a vital piece of industrial infrastructure. But then the metro system was built underground. It was faster and more efficient for moving people across the city. The Petite Ceinture became obsolete. The trains stopped running, and the tracks were abandoned. Nature slowly began to reclaim the path. Trees grew, wildflowers bloomed, and it became a haven for wildlife within the dense city. Its obsolescence was its salvation. It became a forgotten space, a secret garden that exists only because it was left behind by progress. In the 12th century, King Philippe Auguste decided to build a great wall around Paris. This was more than just an act of defense. It was a declaration. At the time, Paris was just one of several important towns in the kingdom. By enclosing it within a massive new wall, the king was defining it as his capital. He was drawing a line and saying, "This is the center." The wall had a profound effect on the city's growth. It created a firm boundary that could not be easily expanded. With no room to spread out, Paris had to grow inward and upward. The city became denser, buildings grew taller, and streets remained narrow. The wall forced a verticality and density that would define the character of the city's core for centuries to come. It was a stone embrace that shaped the city's form. When the Centre Pompidou opened in 1977, it was a shock. In the heart of one of Paris's oldest neighborhoods, a strange new building appeared. It looked like it had been turned inside out. Its skeleton of steel and its colorful pipes for air, water and electricity were all on the exterior. This was a deliberate gamble. President Georges Pompidou wanted to jolt the Parisian art scene out of its traditionalist slumber. He envisioned a new kind of cultural institution, one that was democratic, accessible, and radically modern. Placing this high-tech machine in a historic district was a statement. It was meant to be disruptive. It was a bet that this architectural shock would create a new, vibrant energy, making Paris once again the undisputed center of the contemporary art world. It was a successful gamble. The booksellers along the Seine are a cherished part of the Parisian landscape. Their dark green boxes line the quays, filled with old books and prints. They seem like a timeless, gentle tradition. But their origins are much more rebellious. The first, bouquinistes, appeared in the 16th century as underground peddlers. They operated without licenses, often selling books that were banned by the authorities. They dealt in controversial Protestant texts, political pamphlets, and forbidden literature. They were part of a subversive, underground literary culture. The iconic green boxes we see today are the modern, regulated descendants of this defiant past. They are a sanitized and romantic version of a tradition that began in whispers and shadows. The quiet riverside stalls were born from a history of dissent, a quiet rebellion of the printed word that has now become an institution. The winter of 1870 was a time of terrible suffering in Paris. The city was under siege by the Prussian army, cut off from all food supplies. As the weeks turned into months, starvation became desperate. Parisians were forced to eat whatever they could find. They ate the city's cats and dogs. They ate the rats from the sewers. Eventually they even ate the exotic animals from the city zoo, the Jardin des Plantes. This shared trauma of extreme hunger and humiliation had a profound effect. It forged a deep sense of anger and resentment among the working class. When the siege ended, this desperation did not disappear. It erupted just a few months later into the violent civil war of the Paris Commune. The rage that fueled the Commune was born directly from the bitter, starving winter that had preceded it. In the middle of the 14th century, a devastating plague swept across Europe. When the Black Death arrived in Paris in 1348, it was a catastrophe unlike any other. It is estimated that up to half of the city's population died. This immense loss of life was a demographic reset for the city. In the aftermath, everything changed. With so few people left, workers were suddenly in high demand. Labor shortages meant that surviving artisans and laborers could demand higher wages and better conditions. This newfound power weakened the old feudal order of lords and guilds. It shifted the balance of power in the city. The plague, in its terrible way, cleared a path for a new social and economic structure to emerge. Paris was irrevocably altered not by a king or a war, but by a microscopic organism. In the 1960s, Paris needed a new international airport. The existing ones were too small for the coming jet age. The site chosen was a vast, flat expanse of farmland far to the northeast of the city. This was a practical decision based on space and flight paths. But it had a huge impact on the city's development. The construction of Charles de Gaulle Airport pulled the entire region's growth in a new direction. It created a new economic hub far from the historic center. An aerotropolis began to form around it, with hotels, convention centers, and logistics companies. This single infrastructure project reshaped the economy of the Île-de-France region. It tilted the map of Paris, creating a new pole of activity and drawing investment and people toward the northeast, a direction the city had not previously favored. There are two cities layered on top of each other on the left bank. The first is Lutetia, the Roman city. It had a neat, orderly grid of streets, a theater, and an arena. Its structure was logical and planned. But after the Roman Empire collapsed, Paris retreated. Its people abandoned the left bank and took refuge on the defensible Île de la Cité. For centuries, the old Roman city was left to decay. When Paris eventually expanded back onto the left bank, the growth was different. It was medieval, organic and chaotic. New streets followed old footpaths and property lines. They twisted and turned, creating the labyrinthine layout we see today. The famous winding streets of the Latin Quarter exist because the Roman grid was forgotten. Baron Haussmann later tried to destroy this medieval chaos, imposing a new order on the city once again. In the 17th century, Paris was home to a large and prosperous community of Protestants, known as Huguenots. They were highly skilled artisans, merchants and financiers. They were a vital part of the city's economy. But in 1685, the king revoked the Edict of Nantes, which had granted them religious freedom. A new wave of persecution began. Faced with forced conversion or death, thousands of Huguenots chose to flee. This exodus was a massive brain drain for Paris. The city lost a huge number of its most talented and productive citizens. Their skills and capital did not just disappear. They went to rival cities like London, Amsterdam and Geneva. These cities welcomed the refugees, and their economies benefited directly from the talent that Paris had cast out. It was a self-inflicted wound that strengthened the city's competitors. When you look at the Eiffel Tower, it appears to be a single uniform shade of brown from top to bottom. But this is a clever optical illusion. The tower is actually painted in 3 different shades. The darkest color is used on the bottom section. A slightly lighter shade is used for the middle. The very top is painted the lightest of the 3. This gradient is designed to counteract the effects of atmospheric perspective. Against the bright sky, a single color would make the top look paler than the bottom. By painting it progressively lighter, the engineers ensured the tower would appear as one consistent color to an observer on the ground. It's a subtle detail of applied art, a painter's trick used on a monumental scale to create a perfect, solid silhouette against the Parisian sky. Deep beneath the lavish splendor of the Palais Garnier Opera House, there is a secret. A large, hidden body of water lies in the darkness of its foundations. This is not a mythical lake from a novel. It is a real and functional part of the building's design. When the architect, Charles Garnier, began construction in the 19th century, he hit a problem. The site was swampy, and groundwater kept flooding the excavation. He couldn't pump it out. So instead of fighting the water, he decided to incorporate it. He designed a huge, double-lined concrete reservoir to contain it. This underground cistern not only controlled the water, but its immense weight also helps to stabilize the massive building above. The famous Opera House literally floats on a man-made lake, a brilliant engineering solution hidden beneath the stage. The Paris catacombs are one of the city's most famous and unsettling attractions. But they were not built as tombs. They are an ossuary, a place for storing bones. Their story begins with the city's overflowing cemeteries. By the 18th century, Parisian graveyards were unsanitary and dangerously full. The city needed a solution. At the same time, Paris was sitting on a vast network of abandoned limestone quarries. These were the same tunnels that had provided the stone to build the city. a decision was made to repurpose them. Over several decades, the bones of millions of Parisians were exhumed from the cemeteries. They were carefully transported and neatly stacked in the old quarry tunnels. The catacombs are not a burial ground, but a vast and orderly municipal storage project, a practical solution to a grim problem. The Sacré-Cœur Basilica on the hill of Montmartre has a brilliant, almost supernatural whiteness. It seems to defy the city's pollution, never growing dull or grey. This is not because it is constantly cleaned. It is because the church is built from a remarkable, self-cleaning stone. The material is a type of travertine, sourced from the quarries of Château Landon. This particular stone has a unique chemical property. When it rains, the water reacts with the surface of the stone, creating a substance called calcite. This calcite acts as a natural bleach. It cleans the stone's surface, washing away soot and grime. So every time it rains, the basilica is given a gentle cleaning. Its facade is constantly being renewed, ensuring that it always remains a luminous white landmark, gleaming high above the city, whatever the weather. The Centre Pompidou wears its inner workings on the outside. Its radical design exposes the building's functional systems, turning them into a vibrant architectural feature. The colors of the external pipes are not random decoration. They are a functional key, a color code that helps you read the building. Each color represents a different system. The large blue pipes are for air conditioning, circulating cool air throughout the structure. The green pipes are for water, from plumbing to fire hydrants. The yellow casings contain the building's electrical wiring. And the bright red elements are for circulation and safety. This includes the famous exterior escalator, the Brouwer, caterpillar, that snakes up the facade, carrying people. It's a building that explains itself, a living diagram, where you can see exactly how the machine of the museum works. The green plant-like entrances to the Paris metro are an iconic part of the city's streetscape. Designed by Hector Guimard in the Art Nouveau style, they look like fantastical gateways to the underground. Their swirling, organic forms and glowing lamps are now beloved symbols of Paris. But when they were first installed around 1900, many Parisians found them shocking and ugly. The style was so radical and flamboyant that it was considered garish. The entrances were criticized for clashing with the classical stone architecture of the city. Over the years, many of the original Guimard entrances were torn down and replaced with more sober designs. The ones that survived are now cherished and protected as historical monuments. What was once seen as an eyesore has become a treasured work of art, a testament to changing tastes. In the heart of Paris, there is a bridge called the Pont Neuf, which means new bridge. This name is a quiet irony, because the Pont Neuf is now the oldest standing bridge across the Seine. Its construction began in the 16th century, and when it was completed, it was revolutionary. It was new for two important reasons. First, it was the first bridge in Paris to be built entirely of stone, making it stronger and more durable than its wooden predecessors. Second, and more importantly, it was the first bridge built without houses and shops on top of it. Medieval bridges were crowded with buildings, but the Pont Neuf was designed to be an open thoroughfare. It even had sidewalks to protect pedestrians from the mud and horses. It was a new idea of what a bridge could be. Not a street, but a crossing. When you visit the Louvre, you are walking through layers of history. The building we see today is a grand palace, but it began as something much different. Deep beneath the public galleries and the glass pyramid, you can step back in time. The museum has excavated and preserved the foundations of the original structure that stood on this site. Here you can walk through the remains of a 12th century medieval fortress. You can see the base of the massive central keep and trace the outline of the original moat that surrounded it. These rough, powerful stone walls are a stark contrast to the elegant palace above. They are a reminder that before the Louvre was a home for art or kings, it was a defensive castle at the edge of the city, a raw and powerful symbol of medieval royal authority. The Paris metro system is a sprawling network of tunnels and stations. But not all of them are in use. Hidden within the system are over a dozen ghost stations. These are stations that were built but never opened, or were closed down decades ago and abandoned. Some were closed during World War II and never reopened. Others were part of planned line extensions that were never completed. These stations sit in the darkness, silent and empty, as trains rush past them. They are frozen in time, with their old tilework and faded advertisements. While most are inaccessible, a few have found a new life. Stations like Porte de Lille Cinema are no longer for passengers. They are used exclusively as atmospheric film sets, their dusty platforms and silent tracks providing the perfect backdrop for movies set in another era. Beneath the bustling streets of Paris lies another, darker city, the sewer system. This vast network of tunnels is a mirror image of the city above. It is a complex and potentially disorienting labyrinth. To help workers navigate this underground world, the engineers created a simple and brilliant system. On the curved brick walls of the tunnels, you will find plaques with street names and building numbers. These plaques are identical to the iconic blue and white signs on the surface. They are placed directly below their above-ground counterparts. This means that sewer workers can navigate the dark, branching tunnels as if they were walking through the city itself. They know that if they are standing under the plaque for 24 Rue de Rivoli, that exact building is directly above their heads. It's a map hidden in plain sight. High above the streets of the 12th arrondissement, a garden path winds its way through the city. This is the Promenade Plantée, also known as the Coulée Verte. It is a 4.7-kilometer elevated park, a ribbon of green space lifted above the urban bustle. This beautiful walkway was the first of its kind in the world. It was built on a disused 19th-century railway viaduct. The railway line once connected the Bastille to the city's eastern suburbs, but it was abandoned as the metro grew. Instead of tearing down the old brick viaduct, the city decided to transform it. In the 1980s, it was converted into a park, with trees, flowers and benches. This pioneering project of adaptive reuse provided the direct inspiration for later parks like the High Line in New York, creating a new model for green space in dense cities. At the western end of Paris's historical axis stands the Grande Arche de la Défense. It is a monumental hollow cube that seems to perfectly frame the sky. It appears to be a simple, pure geometric form, perfectly aligned with the city's other great monuments. But there are two subtle imperfections. First, it is not a perfect cube. It is slightly rectangular to enhance its perspective. More surprisingly, it is not perfectly aligned with the historical axis that runs from the Louvre through the Arc de Triomphe. The entire massive structure is subtly rotated by 6.33 degrees. This was not an aesthetic choice. It was a practical necessity. The engineers had to turn the building slightly to place its deep foundations. They needed to avoid the network of underground motorways and rail lines that already crisscrossed the site. Scattered throughout the parks and squares of Paris, you will find ornate, green cast-iron fountains. These are the Wallace Fountains, and they are more than just decoration. They are a legacy of a difficult time in the city's history. They were installed in the 1870s, just after the devastating Prussian siege in the Paris Commune. During the conflict, much of the city's water supply was destroyed. The price of water skyrocketed, and the poor had little access to clean drinking water. A British philanthropist named Sir Richard Wallace decided to help. He gifted 50 of these fountains to the city to provide free, clean water for everyone. Their design, with 4 caryatids representing kindness, simplicity, charity and sobriety, was a symbol of hope and renewal for a city that had suffered greatly. The Place de la Bastille is a name synonymous with the French Revolution. At its center stands a tall green column, topped with a golden statue. It is easy to assume that this monument, the July column, commemorates the famous storming of the Bastille prison in 1789. But it does not. The column was erected to honor the victims of a different, later revolution. It commemorates the 3 glorious days of the July Revolution of 1830, which overthrew King Charles X. The names of those who died in that uprising are engraved in gold on the column. More than that, their remains are interred in a crypt built into the monument's foundations. The column at the heart of the Place de la Bastille is not a monument to the beginning of the First Revolution, but a tomb for the heroes of the Second. Tucked away in a quiet corner of the Latin Quarter is a surprising remnant of the ancient world. The Arène de Lutèce is a Roman amphitheatre built in the 1st century AD. When Paris was the Roman city of Lutetia, this arena was a major center of public life. It could seat up to 15,000 spectators, who would gather to watch theatrical performances and gladiatorial combats. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the arena was abandoned and gradually buried. It was rediscovered in the 19th century, during construction work. Today, what remains of the ancient stone tiers is a peaceful public park. The central arena, where gladiators once fought, is now a gravel court. It's a place where local residents come to play pétanque, and children come to play soccer. It is a place where the deep past and the quiet present coexist. The view from a Parisian rooftop is one of the most recognizable cityscapes in the world. It is a sea of grey zinc roofs, punctuated by thousands of terracotta chimney pots. This distinctive and harmonious skyline is not an accident of time. It is the direct result of the strict building codes imposed by Baron Haussmann in the 19th century. His massive urban renewal project dictated nearly every aspect of the new buildings. The codes regulated the height of buildings, the alignment of their facades, and the materials that could be used. The gentle slope of the zinc mansard roofs and the placement of balconies were all standardized. This created the unified, elegant appearance of the city's core. The beautiful, rhythmic pattern of the Parisian skyline is the product of a powerful and prescriptive vision of urban order. At the entrance to the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, there is a golden flame on a black marble pedestal. It is a full-size gold-leaf replica of the flame from the Statue of Liberty's torch. It was given as a gift in 1989 to thank France for its role in restoring the statue. For years it was just a little-known monument. Then, in 1997, Princess Diana died in a car crash in the tunnel directly below. In the days and weeks that followed, the public spontaneously adopted the flame as an unofficial memorial. People began leaving flowers, photos and messages at its base. It has remained so ever since. The monument, originally intended to celebrate a historic friendship between nations, has been given a new and poignant meaning by the people of Paris. It is a place of public grief and remembrance. On the floor of the Saint-Sulpice church, a thin brass line is set into the stone. It runs across the transept and up a tall white obelisk. It looks like a mystical symbol, perhaps part of some ancient secret code. But its purpose is entirely scientific. The line is a gnomon, a sophisticated astronomical instrument built in the 18th century. A small hole in a high window allows a single ray of sunlight to enter the church. As the sun moves across the sky, this beam of light travels along the brass line. It functions as a giant sundial. Its primary purpose was to track the sun's position throughout the year. This allowed astronomers to accurately determine the winter solstice, and from that, the precise date of Easter. It is a beautiful and unexpected intersection of faith and the science of celestial mechanics. The Pantheon was originally built as a grand church. After the Revolution, it was transformed into a secular mausoleum for the great heroes of the French nation. Beneath its vast dome you will find the tombs of writers, scientists and philosophers. But you will also find a famous scientific instrument. A long cable hangs from the center of the dome, with a heavy brass bob at its end. This is a replica of Foucault's pendulum. In 1851, the physicist Léon Foucault used this very spot for a groundbreaking experiment. He set a large pendulum swinging. As the hours passed, the plane of its swing appeared to slowly rotate. This was not the pendulum changing direction. It was the floor of the Pantheon, and the Earth itself, rotating beneath it. It was the first simple, elegant demonstration of the Earth's rotation. On the Île de la Cité, the Conciergerie stands as a beautiful example of Gothic palace architecture. Its towers and grand halls speak of medieval royalty and power. But this beautiful building holds a very dark past. During the French Revolution, a portion of the palace was converted into the main prison of the Reign of Terror. It became known as the Culm, antechamber to the guillotine. Thousands of prisoners were held here in grim, overcrowded cells, while they awaited trial and execution. Its most famous prisoner was Marie Antoinette, who spent her last weeks in a small, guarded cell. The building is a place of stark contrasts. You can stand in the magnificent hall of the men-at-arms, and then walk just a few steps to see the reconstructed cells where the enemies of the revolution waited for their death. If you look closely at the walls of some older buildings in the 13th arrondissement, you can see ghosts. These are ghost signs, faded painted advertisements from a bygone era. They advertise businesses that have long since disappeared. Many of these signs are for tincturies, or dye works, and tanneries. They are a faint echo of the neighborhood's industrial past. This area was once the center of Paris's leather and textile industries. These businesses were clustered here for a specific reason. The Bièvre River. The river, which once flowed openly through these streets, provided the water needed for their work. It also carried away their industrial waste. The river is now buried, hidden beneath the asphalt. But these faded signs on the brick walls remain as a quiet, peeling reminder of the lost river, and the industries that once lined its banks. In a small, quiet garden square in Montmartre, there is a wall dedicated to a single idea. The I Love You wall is a contemporary landmark, a modern monument to romance. It was created in the year 2000 by two artists. The wall covers 40 square meters and is made of more than 600 tiles of enameled lava. On these tiles the phrase, "I love you," is inscribed over and over again. It appears 311 times, written in 250 different languages and scripts from all around the world. The small red splashes on the wall are said to represent the pieces of a broken heart, which the wall of love is trying to gather back together. It has become a quiet pilgrimage site for couples, and a colorful, modern testament to a universal feeling, hidden in a city already famous for love. The Bastille is a name that echoes through history, but the building itself is gone. The infamous fortress prison was stormed in 1789, and was completely demolished shortly after. It was erased from the city's landscape. But if you know where to look, you can still trace its footprint. On the modern Place de la Bastille, with its busy traffic circle and opera house, the outline of the old fortress is marked out on the ground. A line of paving stones, different from the surrounding asphalt and cobblestones, traces the exact location of the fortress's massive walls. Pedestrians and cars cross over it every day, most without noticing. It's a subtle, almost invisible memorial. It allows you to stand in the present and see the ghost of the powerful structure that once dominated this space, its foundations now just a pattern in the pavement. Montmartre is famous for its artists, its basilica, and its bustling squares. But hidden on its northern slope is something unexpected, a small, working vineyard. This is the Clos Montmartre. It is a quiet patch of green, in the middle of the dense city. This vineyard continues a tradition of winemaking on the hill that is centuries old. The slopes of Montmartre were once covered in vineyards, dating all the way back to Roman times. By the early 20th century, they had all disappeared, replaced by buildings. This small plot was planted in the 1930s, to save the land from developers, and to honor the area's agricultural past. Every year the grapes are harvested, and a few hundred bottles of wine are produced. It is a small, living link to the rural history of a now very urban hill. The great Gothic cathedrals of France reach for the heavens. Notre Dame is one of the most famous examples of this ambition. One of its key innovations was the use of flying buttresses. These are the graceful, arched stone supports that line the exterior of the building. They were a revolutionary engineering feat. The massive weight of the roof and stone vaults naturally pushed the walls outwards. The buttresses acted as external props, catching that weight and transferring it safely to the ground. By supporting the walls from the outside, they freed the builders from needing thick, heavy stone walls on the inside. This allowed them to cut vast openings in the walls. They could then fill these spaces with huge, delicate expanses of stained glass, flooding the interior of the cathedral with color and light. The buttresses created a skeleton of stone, allowing the walls to become curtains of glass. Sometimes the most perfect things are the most simple. In Paris, the quintessential lunch is the jambon beurre. It is just a sandwich, but it is a perfect one. It has only 3 ingredients. First, a fresh baguette, bought that morning from a good bakery. It must have a crisp crust and a soft, airy interior. Second, high-quality French ham, or jambon de Paris. It is delicate and flavorful, not too salty. And third, good butter, thick and unsalted, spread generously. The genius of the jambon beurre is not in complexity. It is in the absolute quality of each of its simple parts. When the ingredients are right, the combination is sublime. It is a taste of Paris that is both humble and deeply satisfying, a daily ritual for students and executives alike. It is the city's most honest and delicious meal. As the afternoon fades in Paris, a subtle shift occurs. The city's rhythm changes. This is the hour of the apéro, the sacred pre-dinner ritual. Around 7 in the evening the workday is done, but the night has not yet begun. The apéro is the gentle buffer between the two. Friends gather on café terraces, in apartments, or along the banks of the Seine. They share a light drink, a glass of wine, a beer, or a pastis. There might be a small bowl of olives, or some nuts. It is not a meal, and it is not a party. It is a moment to decompress, to talk, to transition from the world of work to the world of personal life. It is a collective, city-wide exhalation before the evening truly begins. A small, shared pause that is an essential part of the daily cadence. When you sit at a Parisian café, you might notice something about the chairs. On the terrace, the small rattan or metal chairs are almost always facing outwards, towards the street. They are arranged in rows, like seats in a theater. This is not an accident. The arrangement reveals the true purpose of the café terrace. It is not primarily a place for private conversation with your companion. It is a place for the shared, silent performance of watching the city go by. You sit next to your friend, but you both look out at the same scene. You watch the people, the traffic, the light changing on the buildings. It is a collective, contemplative activity. The street is the stage, and the café patrons are the audience. It is a uniquely Parisian way of being alone, together, in public. On Sunday mornings in Paris, The sound of traffic is replaced by the hum of conversation. All over the city, streets close down and transform into bustling open-air markets. The weekly market is a fundamental ritual of Parisian life. It is a shopping trip, but it is also much more than that. It is a social event. Neighbors who might not see each other all week gather at the same stalls. They catch up on news while they squeeze melons or choose cheese. They ask the vendors what is good this week. They buy fresh produce, meat and bread for the traditional Sunday family lunch. The market is a sensory experience. The colors of the vegetables, the smell of roasting chicken, the sound of a community coming together. It is the living, breathing heart of the neighborhood for a few hours each week. Once a year, on a summer evening in Paris, a strange and beautiful spectacle unfolds. Thousands of people, all dressed elegantly in white, converge on a single, iconic location. This is the Dîner en Blanc, a mass chic picnic that is both exclusive and public. The location is kept a secret until the very last moment. Participants receive a message and then they arrive, carrying tables, chairs, white tablecloths and gourmet food. For a few hours, a famous landmark like the Place de la Concorde, or the courtyard of the Louvre, is transformed into a magical, impromptu banquet. Then, as quickly as it began, it is over. The guests pack up everything they brought, including their trash, and melt back into the night. They leave the space exactly as they found it, a fleeting moment of spontaneous elegance, leaving almost no trace behind. August in Paris is a quiet, sleepy month. The city empties out as Parisians leave for their long summer holidays. The streets are calm, the metro is less crowded. Then comes September, and with it, la rentrée. This is the return, and it is a city-wide reset. It is more than just the end of vacation. It is a collective new beginning. The city floods back to life, with a palpable energy. Everyone returns to work and school. Bookstores are filled with people buying novels for the new literary season. Theaters and galleries launch their new programs. There is a sense of purpose and renewal in the air. The quiet of August is replaced by a fresh, focused buzz. It is the true start of the new year for Paris, a moment when the entire city seems to take a deep breath and begin again. French onion soup is a classic bistro dish, a comforting bowl of rich broth, sweet onions, and melted cheese. Its origins are tied to the old rhythm of the city's working life. The soup was the traditional late-night meal for the workers at Les Halles, the central food market. After a long night of hauling crates and selling produce, they needed something hot, hearty, and restorative. The nearby brasseries would serve this soup all through the night, and into the early morning. The market is gone now, moved to the suburbs. But the tradition continues in certain old brasseries around the city. They still serve French onion soup into the early hours. It remains the perfect meal for the end of a long night, a taste of the old working Paris that still warms the city after dark. There is a certain way of walking in Paris that has its own name. To be a flâneur is to be an idle stroller, a wanderer of the city streets. The flâneur has no goal, no destination, and no hurry. The purpose of the walk is the walk itself. It is an art of observation. The flâneur is a connoisseur of the city, taking in the small details of urban life. They notice the architecture, the faces in the crowd, the little dramas playing out on the street corners. This idea of aimless, observant wandering became a key part of the city's identity in the 19th century. It is a way of experiencing Paris, not as a series of landmarks to be visited, but as a living, breathing poem to be read. To be a flâneur is to let the city reveal itself to you, one step at a time. The life of the bouquinistes, the booksellers along the Seine, is governed by a simple, ancient rhythm. Their daily ritual follows the light. In the morning, as the city wakes up, they arrive at their designated spots along the riverbank. They unlock the large, dark green boxes that are their storefronts. They prop open the lids, revealing the treasures inside: old books, vintage posters and antique prints. All day, they wait for customers, watching the river and the city go by. Then, as the sun begins to set, the ritual is reversed. The lids are closed and latched. The books are secured for the night. This simple opening and closing has been a part of the city's daily life for centuries. It is a rhythm tied not to clocks or commerce, but to the rising and setting of the sun over Paris. In the parks of Paris, a quiet and focused ritual unfolds every afternoon. You will see them in the Jardin de Luxembourg, along the Canal Saint-Martin, or in the ancient Roman arena of Arène de Lutèce. Groups of men, mostly older, gather for their daily game of pétanque. It is a social activity, a time to meet with friends. But it is also a serious sport. You can see the concentration on their faces as they measure distances and plan their next throw. The only sounds are the quiet murmur of conversation, the satisfying click of metal boules striking each other, and the soft thud as they land in the gravel. It is a slow, deliberate game that has its own gentle pace. This daily gathering is a fixture of neighborhood life, a timeless scene of friendship and friendly competition in the afternoon light. Many French pastries have long and storied histories. The story of the Paris Brest is tied to the history of sport. This dessert is a ring of choux pastry, filled with a rich praline-flavored cream and topped with almonds. Its circular shape is not an accident. The pastry was created in 1910 by a baker named Louis Durand. His patisserie was on the route of a famous long-distance bicycle race, the Paris-Brest-Paris event. To honor the race and the cyclists, he designed the pastry to resemble a bicycle wheel. The dessert quickly became popular with the riders, who valued its high energy content. It is a delicious tribute to a grueling athletic endeavor. Every time you eat a Paris-Brest, you are tasting a piece of French cycling history, a celebration of endurance in the form of a sweet, creamy pastry. On the morning of July 14th, the normal rhythm of Paris is broken by a sudden powerful sound. It is the sound of the Bastille Day military parade. The highlight for many is the flyover by the Patrie de France, the Air Force's aerobatic team. The jets fly low and fast in perfect formation over the city. They follow the line of the Champs-Élysées, from the Arc de Triomphe towards the Place de la Concorde. As they roar overhead, they release plumes of smoke in the three colors of the French flag. For a few brief moments, the sky above Paris is painted with trails of blue, white and red. It is a fleeting, dramatic spectacle of national pride. It is a moment when the entire city stops what it is doing and looks up at the sky, a shared ritual of sight and sound. The traditional Parisian waiter can sometimes seem brusque or impatient, but this efficiency is not rudeness. It is a highly skilled performance, a kind of ballet. In a busy brasserie, the waiter must navigate a crowded, chaotic space with speed and grace. They balance heavy trays laden with plates and glasses. They take orders from multiple tables at once, committing them to memory. They move with a practiced, no-nonsense economy of motion. There is no time for idle chatter. The goal is to serve everyone quickly and correctly. This performance has been perfected over generations. It is a dance of controlled haste, a display of professionalism that is essential to the rhythm and energy of the classic Parisian dining experience. The waiter is not just serving food, they are conducting the orchestra of the restaurant. Every 10 to 15 years, the Canal Saint-Martin undergoes a deep cleaning. To do this, the canal must be completely drained. The locks are closed, and the water is slowly pumped out. As the water level drops, a strange and secret museum is revealed on the canal floor. The mud at the bottom holds a collection of lost and discarded objects. It tells a story of city life. There are countless bicycles, a common victim of theft or drunken nights. There are shopping carts, traffic cones and old mobile phones. There are chairs, scooters, and decades of bottles. For a few weeks, this bizarre collection lies exposed to the air. It is a temporary exhibition of the city's forgotten things, a muddy archive of everyday life before the water is allowed to return and hide it all again. The Paris metro carries millions of people every day. The platforms can be crowded, and the cars can be packed. Yet, despite the crowds, there is an unwritten rule of quiet that most people follow. During the morning and evening commute, the atmosphere is surprisingly calm. There is very little conversation. Most passengers are absorbed in their own worlds. They read books, listen to music through headphones, or simply gaze out the window. They are together, but separate. This creates a shared public space that is anonymous and restful. It is a collective agreement to grant each other a small zone of privacy, even when pressed close together. The journey is a moment of quiet transition in a busy day, a calm rhythm that beats steadily beneath the bustling city. In many Parisian apartment buildings, the community is anchored by a single person. This is the gardien or gardienne, the concierge. They typically live in a small apartment on the ground floor, known as the loge. The guardian is the gatekeeper and manager of the building. They receive mail and packages for the residents. They keep the common areas clean. They are the first person to call when something is broken. But their role is more than just practical. They are the social hub of the building. They know everyone's comings and goings. They are a source of information and a watchful eye over the community. The Gardien is a traditional and enduring part of the rhythm of Parisian apartment life, a constant presence that helps turn a building of strangers into a neighborhood. The weekend in Paris has its own special rhythm. For many, Saturday and Sunday mornings are for treasure hunting. This is the time for brocantes and vide-greniers. These are neighborhood flea markets and garage sales that pop up on streets temporarily closed to traffic. Parisians set up tables and sell their unwanted goods. You can find anything here: old clothes, vintage furniture, antique dishes, forgotten toys, and dusty books. The atmosphere is relaxed and social. People stroll from table to table, haggling gently and searching for a bargain. It is a ritual of recycling and rediscovery. One person's clutter becomes another person's treasure. These temporary markets are a beloved part of the weekend cadence, a chance to wander the streets and find a small piece of the past to take home. The first errand of the day for many Parisians is a fundamental ritual. It is the morning croissant run. The goal is to go to the local boulangerie, the neighborhood bakery, and buy a croissant that is still warm from the oven. There is a special pleasure in this. The feel of the warm paper bag in your hand. The smell of butter and baked dough. The sound of the flaky crust shattering on the first bite. This is not just about breakfast. It is about connecting with the neighborhood. It is a brief, pleasant interaction with the baker. It is a small, perfect start to the day. This simple act is repeated thousands of times across the city every morning. It is a quiet, delicious rhythm that helps to wake Paris up, one warm croissant at a time. The café terrace is essential to Parisian life. The right to place tables and chairs on the public sidewalk is a taxed and highly regulated privilege. It is called the droit de terrasse. Because this space is valuable, cafes try to fit as many tables as possible into their allotted area. This is why the tiny round tables are packed so tightly together. You are often sitting just inches away from your neighbors. This enforced proximity creates a unique social atmosphere. You can't help but overhear conversations. You become part of a larger, temporary community. The tight spacing turns a collection of private tables into an intimate and communal public space. It is a physical expression of the city's love for shared street life, a cozy arrangement that forces a little bit of togetherness. While Paris is famous for its haute cuisine, its go-to fast food is simple and timeless. Grabbing a crepe from a street stand is a ritual for both locals and visitors. You can find these small stands all over the city, especially in busy neighborhoods. The process is a little piece of theater. You watch as the vendor pours the thin batter onto the large, round griddle. They spread it expertly with a wooden tool. Then they add your chosen filling. It might be a sweet crepe, folded around Nutella, sugar or jam. Or it could be a savory buckwheat galette, filled with ham, egg, and melted cheese. It is served hot, folded into a cone of paper, for easy eating on the go. It is a quick, cheap and delicious part of the city's culinary rhythm, a warm treat to be enjoyed while walking the streets. Buying wine in Paris is often more than a simple transaction. For many, it involves a personal relationship with their local caviste, the owner of the neighborhood wine shop. A good caviste is like a trusted advisor. They get to know their customers, tastes and budgets. They remember what you bought last time and whether you liked it. They can recommend the perfect bottle for a specific meal or occasion. This is not about selling the most expensive wine. It is about finding the right wine for that person, at that moment. Over the years, a deep trust is built. The caviste becomes a guide to the vast and sometimes intimidating world of French wine. This personal relationship is a cherished part of the rhythm of neighborhood life, a conversation that helps to make a large city feel like a small village. The sound of an accordion is deeply linked with the popular image of Paris. You might hear it while walking through Montmartre, or waiting for a train in a metro station. It can be easy to dismiss this as a cliché, a performance just for tourists. But it is also a living tradition. The instrument became a key part of Parisian popular music in the early 20th century. It was the sound of the dance halls and the working-class neighborhoods. The musicians who play on the streets and in the metro today are carrying on this legacy. They are not just playing for tourists. They are adding a specific, nostalgic soundtrack to the city's daily life. For a few moments, their music can change the feeling of a crowded subway car or a busy street, a brief, melodic reminder of the city's musical soul. When Paris has something to celebrate, a major sports victory, a national holiday, the city converges on the Champs-Élysées. The avenue becomes a river of people, filled with singing, cheering, and waving flags. The celebration can last for hours, a moment of collective joy. But there is a quiet rhythm that follows this chaos. In the early hours of the morning, long after the crowds have gone home, the avenue is eerily quiet. The only sound is the hiss and whir of street cleaning machines. They move slowly up and down the empty boulevard, their brushes sweeping up confetti, discarded flags, and the rest of the night's debris. Under the glow of the street lights, they wash the pavement clean. By dawn, the avenue is pristine again, ready for a new day, with almost no trace of the massive celebration that took place just hours before. For one night each year, the rhythm of Paris is completely inverted. This is the Nuit Blanche, an all-night arts festival. Normally, the city's cultural life goes to sleep in the late evening. But on Nuit Blanche it stays awake until dawn. The city itself becomes a sprawling, nocturnal art gallery. Museums and galleries keep their doors open all night long. Churches and government buildings host special installations. Artists create temporary works in public squares, parks, and along the river. Thousands of people wander the streets through the night, moving from one event to another. It is a night when the usual rules of time are suspended. The boundary between night and day, between public space and art space, dissolves. For a few brief, magical hours, the city's cultural heart beats strongest in the dark. As winter arrives in Paris, a familiar warmth begins to dot the city's squares. The Christmas markets appear, bringing with them a specific seasonal rhythm. Small wooden chalets are set up, creating temporary villages of light and commerce. The cold, crisp air fills with a comforting blend of scents. There is the spicy, sweet smell of vin chaud, the hot mulled wine that warms cold hands. There is the smoky aroma of roasting chestnuts, sold in paper cones. These markets become a focal point of neighborhood life in the weeks leading up to the holidays. People gather after work or on weekends to browse the crafts, sample the food, and soak up the festive atmosphere. It is a cozy, gentle rhythm that provides a welcome warmth against the dark and cold of the Parisian winter. If you walk down Rue Lafayette, you might pass number 145 without a second thought. It looks like a typical, handsome Haussmannian building. It has a carved stone facade, elegant windows, and a wrought iron balcony. But if you look closer, you will notice something strange. The windows are dark and lifeless. There are no reflections, no curtains, no signs of life. That is because the building is entirely fake. The facade is just a front, a decorative screen. It was built to disguise a massive ventilation shaft for the RER train line that runs directly below. The windows are not windows at all, they are just painted onto the wall. It is a piece of urban camouflage, a clever illusion designed to hide a piece of essential infrastructure in plain sight, maintaining the beauty of the street. France has many old and obscure laws that are still technically on the books. One of the most peculiar of these concerns a certain farm animal, and a famous emperor. It is still, to this day, illegal in France to name a pig, Napoleon. This law dates back to the 19th century. It was created to prevent citizens from mocking the former emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. The idea of naming a pig after the great leader was seen as an insult to his dignity and the honor of France. While the law is no longer enforced, it has never been officially repealed. It remains a strange and amusing echo of a time when the emperor's reputation had to be protected by law, even from the barnyard. It's a small, quirky reminder of how seriously the nation once guarded the image of its most famous ruler. Every city has its superlatives, its longest and widest streets. Paris has one that is a little different. The shortest street in the city is the Rue des Degrés, in the 2nd arrondissement. But if you go looking for it, you won't find a street in the usual sense. There is no pavement for cars, or even for pedestrians to walk along. The Rue des Degrés is not a street at all. It is simply a staircase. It consists of just 14 steps, connecting the Rue de Cléry to the Rue Beauregard. The street is only 5.75 meters long and 3.3 meters wide. It is sandwiched between two tall buildings, and its only function is to bridge the difference in their ground levels. It has a name and a street sign, but it is a street for feet only, a small vertical quirk in the city grid. In a quiet square in Montmartre, there is a very strange sight. A man appears to be walking through a solid stone wall. Half of his body is on one side, and half is on the other. This is a bronze sculpture called Le Passe-Muraille, or the Walker Through Walls. It depicts a character from a famous short story by the French writer Marcel Aimé. The story is about a man named Dutilleux, a quiet office worker who discovers one day that he has the strange ability to walk through walls. He uses his power for mischief and romance, but eventually loses it, and becomes trapped forever inside a wall in Montmartre. The sculpture captures that final moment. It is a piece of fiction made solid, a whimsical and slightly melancholy tribute to a beloved local story, forever embedded in the neighborhood where it was set. In the large, open square in front of Notre Dame Cathedral, thousands of people walk every day. Most of them do not notice a small, discreet marker set into the cobblestones. It is a small, circular bronze plaque, no bigger than a dinner plate. At its center is an 8-pointed star. This is Point Zéro des Routes de France. It is the geographic heart of the nation's road system. This exact spot is the official starting point from which all road distances from Paris to other cities in France are measured. When a sign says a town is 150 kilometers from Paris, it means it is 150 kilometers from this very star. It is the origin point, the absolute center. It's a small, humble marker for a very significant role, hiding in plain sight at the feet of the city's most famous landmark. The streets of Paris are now famous for their chaotic traffic. This is a tradition that may have started with the world's very first car crash. In 1771, an inventor named Nicolas Joseph Cugnot was testing a new creation. It was a massive, steam-powered vehicle designed to haul artillery for the French army. This, Fardier a vapor, was one of the very first self-propelled machines. During a test run in Paris, the vehicle went out of control. Its braking system was inadequate, and it was difficult to steer. It crashed into a stone wall, knocking it down. The incident was not serious, but it is widely considered to be the first recorded automobile accident in history. It was a small, clumsy beginning for the age of the automobile, a strange and prophetic event on the streets of the future capital of car culture. The Avenue de l'Opéra is one of Paris's grandest thoroughfares. It provides a spectacular, uninterrupted view of the magnificent facade of the Opéra Garnier. This perfect vista was no accident. It was a very specific design choice made by Baron Haussmann. As he was planning the new avenue, he made a special request. He insisted that there should be no trees planted along its length. This was highly unusual for his new boulevards, which were typically lined with trees. The reason was purely visual. He wanted to ensure that nothing would obstruct the line of sight from the Louvre Palace at one end to the new Opera House at the other. The building itself was meant to be the star of the show. The lack of trees creates a dramatic, architectural canyon that perfectly frames its destination. For decades, the Paris Metro used a small, simple paper ticket. Its dimensions were very specific: 66 mm long and 30 mm wide. This ticket has now been replaced by modern cards, but a curious rumor persists about its size. The story goes that the ticket's dimensions were not chosen at random. They were based on the exact size of the thumb of the engineer who designed the original ticket-punching machines. He supposedly used his own thumb as a guide when creating the mechanism, and the ticket was designed to fit perfectly. While this story is likely just a charming piece of urban folklore, it has been repeated for years. It's a small human-scale legend, that connects the vast impersonal system of the metro to a single anonymous engineer and his thumb. In a small square in Montmartre, there is a bronze bust of the famous singer Dalida, who lived in the neighborhood. The statue is a realistic depiction of the beloved star. But one part of it stands out. The singer's chest has been polished to a brilliant golden sheen. It gleams in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the dark patina of the rest of the sculpture. This is not the result of a strange weathering pattern. It is the work of thousands of human hands. A tradition has developed over the years among passers-by. People reach out and touch the statue's bust for good luck. Over time, the constant rubbing has worn away the patina, polishing the raw bronze underneath to a mirror-like finish. It is a monument that has been altered by public affection, a small, strange ritual of hope and remembrance. The Statue of Liberty is a famous symbol of New York City, but it was a gift from France. As a reminder of this connection, Paris has several replicas of the iconic statue. The most famous of these stands on a narrow, man-made island in the Seine, called the Île aux Cygnes, or Island of the Swans. This quarter-scale replica was installed in 1889, 3 years after its larger sister was dedicated in New York. It was positioned with great care. The statue was installed to face west, down the river. It looks directly towards the Atlantic Ocean, and by extension, towards its larger counterpart, in New York Harbor. It is a small, symbolic gesture that connects the two cities, a permanent gaze across the ocean from one sister to the other. In the Latin Quarter, you can find one of the narrowest streets in Paris. At its tightest point, it is less than 2 meters wide. The street has a wonderfully strange name, Rue du Chat qui pêche, or the Street of the Fishing Cat. The name comes from an old legend. The story tells of an alchemist who lived on this street in the 15th century. He had a clever black cat. This cat was said to be unnaturally skilled at catching fish from the nearby Seine, with a single swipe of its paw. Some locals believed the cat and the alchemist were one and the same, or that the cat was a magical familiar. The legend has clung to this tiny atmospheric alleyway. It gives the narrow passage a sense of mystery and folklore, a small story hidden in the city's geography. The Palais Garnier Opera House is a building full of secrets. One of the most fascinating was sealed away for a century. In 1907, the Gramophone Company of Paris made a series of recordings of the most famous opera singers of the day. These recordings, on shellac discs, were a snapshot of the era's greatest voices. They were placed in 2 specially made urns. The urns were then hermetically sealed and placed in a vault in the walls of the opera's cellars. They were a time capsule, intended to be opened 100 years later. In 2007, the vault was opened as planned. The urns and the recordings inside were found to be in perfect condition. The voices of the past were brought back to life, a ghostly concert emerging from the foundations of the building where they had once performed. At 51, Rue de Montmorency in the Marais, stands the oldest stone house in Paris. It was built in 1407, and its timber-framed facade looks like it belongs in a fairy tale. The house was built by a man named Nicolas Flamel. His name has become famous in stories of magic and alchemy, where he is said to have discovered the philosopher's stone. The real Nicolas Flamel was a wealthy scribe and manuscript seller. He built this house not as his personal home, but as a charitable institution. It was a hostel that provided free lodging for the poor. They were asked to say prayers for the souls of Flamel and his wife, in return for their stay. The house's connection to the legendary alchemist has made it famous, but its true story is one of practical charity, not magic. If you look down as you walk through Paris, you might spot small, round bronze medallions set into the sidewalks and floors of buildings. Each one is stamped with the name Arago. There are 135 of these markers, and they trace a line that runs north to south, directly through the city. This line is the Paris Meridian, a line of longitude that was established by the astronomer François Arago in the 19th century. For many years, the Paris Meridian competed with the line at Greenwich, England, to be the world's prime meridian, the zero-degree line for global time and navigation. Greenwich ultimately won, and the Paris Meridian became a historical curiosity. The Arago medallions were installed in 1994 as a subtle monument to this forgotten scientific rivalry, a ghost of a meridian line hidden in the city's pavement. Just outside the main city limits of Paris, there is a special and poignant cemetery. It is the Cimetière des Chiens et autres animaux domestiques, the cemetery of dogs and other domestic animals. Founded in 1899, it is one of the first pet cemeteries in the world. It was created at a time when the city outlawed the random disposal of dead pets. The cemetery became a place where Parisians could give their beloved animal companions a formal and respectful burial. The grounds are filled with small, ornate gravestones for dogs, cats, birds, and even a horse. Its most famous resident is Rin Tin Tin, the German shepherd who became a massive international movie star in the 1920s. It is a quiet, leafy place, a touching monument to the bond between humans and their animals. In the peaceful gardens of the Palais Royal, there is a small, ornate cannon. For many years, it served as a public time signal. The cannon was designed to fire automatically at noon each day. The mechanism was simple and ingenious. A magnifying glass was positioned directly over the cannon's touch hole. As the sun reached its highest point in the sky at midday, its rays would pass through the lens. The focused beam of light would ignite the gunpowder, firing the cannon. This provided a loud and accurate time check for Parisians in the area. The tradition was stopped and started several times over the centuries. The original cannon is still there today. It no longer uses the sun, but it is fired electronically once a week, on Wednesdays at noon, a small bang echoing a clever past. The Dark Tale of Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street, is a famous piece of London folklore. But the story may have its roots in an older, grislier Parisian legend. According to a story from the 15th century, there was a murderous duo who operated on the Ile de la Cité. One was a barber, and the other was a pastry chef. The legend claims that the barber would murder his clients. He would then pass the bodies to his neighbor, the pastry chef, who would bake their flesh into highly sought-after meat pies. The story, whether true or not, was a persistent piece of Parisian lore for centuries. It is possible that this French tale of cannibalistic commerce traveled across the Channel, and later inspired the more famous English version. It's a gruesome legend that connects the two capitals in a very strange way. The Green Wallace fountains are a familiar sight on the streets of Paris. They are decorated with 4 female figures, who stand gracefully under a small roof. These figures are often mistaken for caryatids, the sculpted female forms used as architectural columns. But if you look closely, you will see that they are not supporting any weight. There is a small gap between their heads and the roof above them. They are simply standing there. The sculptor, Charles-Auguste Lebourg, designed them this way intentionally. They are not meant to be architectural supports. They are symbolic figures, each one representing a specific ideal that Sir Richard Wallace wanted to promote. The 4 figures stand for kindness, simplicity, charity, and sobriety. They are not holding up the fountain. They are upholding its values. On a street in the 6th arrondissement, there is a shop that feels like a museum from another time. This is Derol, a taxidermy shop and cabinet of curiosities that was founded in 1831. To step inside is to enter a surreal and wonderful world. The upper floor is a vast, wood-paneled room filled with an astonishing array of animals. A giraffe stands next to a polar bear. A lion seems to roar silently at an ostrich. There are exotic birds, zebras and creatures from every continent, all perfectly preserved and arranged in theatrical scenes. The walls are lined with glass cases containing thousands of meticulously pinned insects, from iridescent beetles to giant moths. It is a place that is both scientific and dreamlike, a perfectly preserved piece of 19th century natural history, frozen in time in the middle of modern Paris. The guillotine is a powerful symbol of the French Revolution, but its use continued long after. The last public execution by guillotine in France took place in 1939, just on the eve of World War II. It happened in the town of Versailles, just outside Paris. The condemned man was a serial killer named Eugen Weidmann. The execution took place in the street, and a large crowd gathered to watch. The event was secretly filmed from a nearby apartment. When the footage and photographs were published, the authorities were scandalized, not by the execution itself, but by the hysterical and unruly behavior of the onlookers. The public reaction was deemed so unseemly that the government immediately banned all future public executions. From then on, the guillotine would only be used in private, inside prison walls, hidden from public view. The Élysée Palace is the official residence of the French president. It is a place of power, politics and diplomacy. It is also home to one of the finest wine cellars in the country. Deep beneath the palace lies a cellar containing around 15,000 bottles of wine. This is not just any wine. The collection includes some of France's rarest and most prestigious vintages, from the best vineyards in Bordeaux, Burgundy, and the Rhône. The cellar is managed by a chief sommelier, a highly respected position. They are responsible for maintaining the collection and selecting the wines to be served at state dinners and official functions. It is a cellar that represents the pinnacle of French gastronomy, a liquid treasure trove used as a tool of hospitality and soft power diplomacy at the highest level. In the Les Halles district, at 14 Rue de la Cossonnerie, there is a building that plays a trick on the eye. If you look at it from the front, it appears to be a perfectly normal, if narrow, apartment building. It has a door, windows, and a typical Parisian facade. But if you walk to the side of it, you will see its secret. The building is impossibly thin. It is barely the depth of a single room, a sliver of a building wedged between two much larger structures. It is what is known as a spite building, though its exact history is unclear. It may have been built to block a neighbor's view, or to make use of a tiny leftover parcel of land. From the side it looks more like a movie set facade than a real building, a strange and slender architectural oddity. On the corner of a building in the Marais there is a very unusual sundial. It is not the simple, familiar type with a dial and a gnomon. This sundial, on the corner of Rue Bernard de Clairvaux, is a complex scientific instrument engraved in stone. It features a strange, snake-like curve. This curve is part of a sophisticated diagram known as the equation of time. A sundial measures solar time, which is based on the actual position of the sun. This time is irregular, and varies throughout the year. Clock time, on the other hand, is a steady average time. The engraved curve on this sundial was a tool. It allowed an educated observer to calculate the difference between the sundial's reading and clock time on any given day, a complex correction for a more precise world. The baguette is a symbol of French life. But not all baguettes are created equal. The baguette de tradition is protected by law. The 1993 decree states that it must be made from only 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast. It must also be made on the premises where it is sold. It cannot be frozen or contain additives. This law ensures a high standard of quality. As a small mark of pride and distinction, some bakers take an extra step. Before baking their loaves, they will carve a tiny, distinct signature into the bottom of the dough. It might be their initial or a small symbol. It is an almost invisible mark, a secret sign of authorship on their daily creation. It's a quiet claim of craftsmanship, a personal touch on the daily bread of Paris. The Louvre Palace is a sprawling complex of buildings, constructed over many centuries. One of its wings, the Pavillon de Marsan, has a small but significant detail that tells a story of institutional rivalry. This wing was built to house the Museum of Decorative Arts. It stands right next to a part of the palace that, at the time, housed the powerful Ministry of Finance. When the Pavillon de Marsan was being reconstructed in the late 19th century, the museum's directors made a specific request. They had their wing built to be deliberately taller than the adjacent wing of the Finance Ministry. It was a subtle but clear act of architectural one-upmanship. It was a way for the world of art and culture to assert its importance, and literally look down on the world of money and politics next door. Our walk through Paris is coming to an end. Wherever you've drifted to, you don't need to come back. There's nothing more to listen for tonight. Sleep well.